creating cultural awareness and understanding. This is Culture Clique. Culture Clique is written and produced by KQAL FM on the campus of Winona State University.
Raise your glasses and put on your glasses, because today on Culture Clique, we're bringing you a part 1 of 3 series of the 38th Nerd Nite that was hosted at the No Name Bar. Nerd Nite is a monthly event hosted for nerds, by nerds, with drinks. This event was put on by WSU professors Dr. Carl Ferkinhoff and Dr. Emily Ruff, where 3 candidates get 15 to 30 minutes to nerd out and speak about their passions. So, if you have a topic you're passionate about or knowledgeable enough to be called a nerd, this event is the place to be. I'm Dylan Alzate, and crack open your textbooks as we nerd it out at Nerd Nite today on Culture Clique.
Hello, nerds. That's pretty good. I think you can do better. Hello, nerds. Oh, that's what I've been missing for the last 2 months. Welcome, I'm Carl. Over there is Mark. Woo! And there's Emily. Where? Oh, wait, where's Emily? Emily has been nurturing a future nerd, Alden Scott. So tentatively she'll be back next month, but maybe October. So she's doing great. Alden's doing great, and we can't wait till he's here to nerd out with us. So this is indeed Nerd Nite Winona, and this whole event is premised on the idea that learning is more fun while having a drink. Cheers, everybody. Some like to say that it's like the Discovery Channel with beer. And so you might be wondering, how did this all begin? Well, I'll tell you. So it starts with this guy, Chris, in Boston at the bar called the Midway, 2003, about over 20 years ago. Now, Chris was a scientist. He was a biologist. He would go to Cameroon and study these birds here called the indigo bird. Oh, very nice. Is it really? No, it's not, because, see, the indigo bird is actually a parasitic bird. It will lay its eggs in other birds' nests, and which is fine, right? You're taking advantage. Be like, hey, I want to go out and have fun. Why don't you take care of my offspring? But the thing is, the indigo bird offspring, they're jealous. They're like, I want all the attention. So they'll sit there and they'll push the other eggs out of the nest. I don't know about you, but look at that little guy. He's struggling. Like, I just go, indigo bird, go. You can do it. So unfortunate. So clearly this is fascinating. And all of Chris's friends thought that as well. But the bartenders were like, dude, every time you come in here, Chris, you're telling the same story. We're getting sick and tired of it. We're going to give you one night to tell us about the indigo birds. And that is how Nerd Nite started. Chris got one night to tell his story, to update his friends about what he learned about these indigo birds. And, so it was successful. He got other friends to come in and tell folks about their nerdy things. And eventually Chris had a friend in New York City and be like, hey, Matt, you should stop hosting trivia and do this Nerd Nite thing. And so Matt did, and it was like awesome. And eventually Nerd Nite spread all over the world. So there's over 100 different Nerd Nites in various cities. I encourage you to go to nerdnite.com. If you're traveling and you're like, I'm going to London, and be like, and I want to get nerdy while I'm in London, go to nerdnite.com. There's a Nerd Nite there. You can go and experience Nerd Nite all over the world. So how did we get Nerd Nite here in Winona? Well, it comes down to my friend Michelle. She did Nerd Nite in New York City. And then we both went to grad school at Cornell. And Michelle now, she's a vegan, really into supporting animals and all that. And I like animals too. So we bonded over we both like animals in different ways, and we bonded over this commonality of beer and nerdiness. And so we started Nerd Nite Ithaca. And after grad school, I went and spent some time in Germany, and then eventually got this fabulous job here in Winona. And I was like, I got here to Winona, and I'm like, beer in Winona is pretty cheap. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, like you go to a neighborhood bar. Well, it's gone up a little bit because of inflation, but there are some bars in town that you can still get a beer for under $2. Like it's like, wow, it's amazing. So I'm like, beverages are awesome in this town, and I want to learn something while I have a beer. So you know what we need? We need Nerd Nite Winona. So I'm like, let's get this thing going. And I found out that Emily actually did Nerd Nite in Madison, Wisconsin. And so Emily's like, yes, we need this. Let's get it going on. And then just last year, Mark comes into town, discovered Nerd Nite, gave a fabulous Nerd Nite talk on AI. And then we're like, hey, Mark, you should help us out. So here we are, Nerd Nite Winona. Yeah. And believe it or not, this is our 38th Nerd Nite. I still can't believe that. And so our first speaker tonight is Nathan Moore. Nathan! Where's our Nathan? Come on up here, Nathan. Now, I just realized that I think Nathan has the honor, after tonight, of giving the most Nerd Nite Winona talks.
I might be a four-timer.
Yeah. This is your fourth time.
It might be.
I've only given the Nerd Nite Winona talk 3 times. So
I've never asked to give a talk.
this is true. So in our day lives, we work together, and when we're struggling to find a speaker, I walk down to Nathan's office, and I'm like, "Hey, Nathan, can you give a Nerd Nite talk?"
I'm the backup.
He's the backup.
I'm sorry.
No, we like Nathan. So tonight, Nathan's going to be talking about, are broken things still useful? And when I was getting ready for the night, I was going through the slides, and I'm like, this is so Nathan, but also so nerdy. And it's also like, this is a summary of the conversations I've had with Nathan over the last 6 months. Those were great conversations, so I'm glad he's sharing those with you tonight. So without further ado, let me get his slides up here.
Thanks.
Nathan Moore!
So, I don't know. Here we go. So I am not a licensed professional engineer. I am not involved in any lawsuits. I am not a doctor. And I am outside of my field of expertise. So take whatever you want from this. I hope it's not that wrong. So how did this story start? So I have 4 children, and we run the dishwasher at least twice a day, sometimes 4 times. And so I put in a dishwasher a couple of years ago, and this summer I was, in the kitchen, and it smelled like the toaster was on. But the toaster wasn't plugged in. And then, you don't just wonder why it doesn't work. You push the button, run it again. The toaster smell just got stronger. And so I took it apart. I thought maybe I could find the parts to fix the dishwasher. And I couldn't. Just saying, I couldn't. And so then I sent an email to the Maytag people, the friendly people at Maytag. And I said, hey, the dishwasher smells like a toaster. And I took it apart, look at the pictures, and I touched the motor. I don't know, it might have been like this. And I burned my finger because it was so hot. So it seemed like a fire hazard. And, I'd already bought a new dishwasher and sent it to Maytag. By the time this response finally came back, oh, yeah, we have to send a guy out. Great. It was in the dumpster. And I was kind of sad that, that my dishwasher almost caught on fire and ate itself. I was sad about that. But what I was really sad about was the fact that, Maytag was just concerned with money and liability and sending out a repair person. To me, if your dishwasher is going to catch on fire because it eats itself, seems like something that you should fix in your design. And so I was mad, but on Amazon, you can't leave a review for dishwashers. I looked and looked and looked. And so instead I made this webpage. It's right there. And it's not just about this dishwasher. It's just about all kinds of stuff that I've run into that's broken. And of course, being a nice friend, I sent it to Carl and Andy and Jen and other people, and they're like, what the hell are you doing? I think that might have been the polite thing they replied with. And so on that webpage, I've just got a bunch of things that broke. and maybe a little reflection on why they broke. Now, I'm not saying that anything is true, and I'm not saying there's any deep moral message from any of this. I've just been thinking about it. And here's something I think that's deep and true in our culture. I don't care whose fault it is. Let's just fix it. I don't care, because like when you pull the hood over the villain in every Scooby-Doo episode, how does that make anyone's life better? It doesn't. It doesn't. This is prison in Norway on the right. This is what prison looks like in Norway or Sweden or France. Like, do we care about fixing things or do we care about vengeance? Anyway, so here's something else. On the way home, this is East Burns Valley Road, right by the Winona farm. I posted this picture on Google Maps, and Dick Gallion sent me like 8 emails that week because he was really angry because he owns this farm field. Why would you talk about my bad road? Whatever. I don't care. What do you notice about the road? Tell the person next to you. No, really, what do you notice? Yeah, there's a crack. Tell me about the location of the crack. Is it everywhere? Well, okay, yeah, it's everywhere in this direction. Where's the crack, left or right? Yeah. Now, there's 5 miles down the road, there's a guy that drives a semi-truck. And semi-trucks, the damage a car or a truck or a bicycle does is like the 5th power of the mass. So if a truck is like twice as heavy, it does 32 times as much damage to the road. So part of that is probably, my neighbor who drives a semi-truck back and forth because it's a big load. But the other part of this is that this hillside, up high, down low, is really steep. And so the steepness of the hillside, when you push down on the road slumps. That's actually a Dr. Jennifer Anderson geology word, right? If you have a hill and you push down on it, it slumps, it tips over. And so that's why there's asymmetry here. There's not really any pronounced cracking on the left compared to the right because downhill is really bad. Now, if you care about fixing things, what you should do is get a giant bulldozer, maybe a fleet of them, and you should level out this whole hillside. And then the road won't crack. Great, that would be scenic. No, I mean, really, sometimes there's problems, and we just don't care about fixing them, because fixing them would be worse than the problem itself. Here's a different thing that's broken. My gut. So when I eat wheat or barley, sadly I'm not a beer drinker anymore, this is wonderful cider, my immune system stomps on the nice, furry, frondy, feathery small intestine that I have. And instead of having like a really rough surface with lots of surface area to absorb food, I have the inside of a hot dog. It's just a straight tube. And this is what it is if you have celiac disease, which is just something I'm born with. Is this a problem? Well, one time I asked a doctor, and he said, well, some people think a lot of people in Ireland have celiac disease, and if your body really sucks at absorbing nutrients, you might have lower cholesterol. So it might have a very subtle protective effect. But he said, don't ever tell anyone this. It might not be true. I just heard it. He was a nice internist at Mayo. Anyway, so if you have a really healthy immune system, you probably have to take a statin. There's another version of this. There's a thing called sickle cell anemia. And if you have sickle cell anemia, it's like a gene that you have. And if you get the gene from both of your parents, then often, but not always, the hemoglobin inside of your red blood cells is kind of a filament. And that filament makes your donut-shaped red blood cells that carry oxygen into, kind of like plantain-shaped. I don't think anybody knows what a sickle is anymore. And if you have 2 copies of this gene, it's really bad, and you have anemia, and like blood gets stuck, and the blood cells aren't squishy, so it's hard to get them through capillaries. I actually even asked a biologist, and most of what I'm saying she said was pretty true. But here's the thing. The people that have 1 copy of the sickle cell disease, gene have basically built-in biological protection against malaria. Because if you have a single copy, the malaria parasite has trouble eating the stuff inside of your red blood cells. And so it's hard to replicate. And so it's almost like having a single copy of this sickle cell gene is medicine. I'm not a real biologist. You don't want it. But apparently in sub-Saharan Africa, a single copy of the disease is everywhere because it's super protective. Okay. They did some stuff during COVID, and apparently, like if you look at the bones, the teeth of people that died during the Black Death, most of those people didn't have autoimmune diseases. And so they died en masse during the Black Death. And the people who made it through the Black Death, it's conjectured, had stuff like sickle cell and celiac disease and rheumatoid arthritis. They had overactive immune systems because that would stomp on whatever the Black Death parasite is. Now, again, I'm not a biologist. I don't really know. But, I mean, it says Harvard, so... All right, here's my lawn. Last week, 2 weeks ago, one of my neighbors came by and said, "Boy, you really mow your lawn in a weird way." And I do. I have this amazing electric lawnmower from Menards. A lot of people would think that this electric lawnmower is broken because it doesn't make a loud noise, it doesn't burn gasoline, and the battery doesn't really last very long, about 45 minutes. All of those things to me are not problems. And maybe sometimes broken is a point of view. Like the fact to me that the lawnmower only lasts 45 minutes, awesome. I don't have to mow the lawn for very long. Now, Tom Reichstad thinks I'm a total hack because, look at all the grass that's left over and tall. I don't care. I'm not a golfer. The grass doesn't care. And the mulch I put in my garden doesn't have all kinds of gasoline and oil that's unburned that I'm putting on top of my peppers. And it's impossible to weed the garden nowadays. It's too late in the summer, so give up and mulch. The best part, I think, is that everyone's scared of battery-powered electric mowers, and so the warranty is epic. It's like 4 years. If anything goes wrong with it, we'll replace it, which is pretty good warranty from Menards. So anyway, again, I don't care whose fault it was. That's like a useless thing to wonder about, I think. All right, so I've got like 3 more stories and then 2 pieces of poetry. So, number 1, smoke detectors. Smoke detectors reduce your chance of dying in a fire by about 50%, according to the internet. How does a smoke detector work? There are 2. They've only really been around since the 1970s because the electronics to run them are really heavy in 1960. You had to have all kinds of vacuum tubes and giant power supplies. So nobody had smoke detectors in the 60s or the 50s. So an ionization radioactivity smoke detector works in that you have a radioactive source from like a power plant, and it gives off helium-4 nuclei, giant gas atoms. And they knock electrons off of air molecules, and then that shower of electrons creates an electrical current, and the alarm doesn't go off because there's no smoke. But smoke, just like charcoal, just like what's inside of a Brita filter, is chemically sticky. And I'm really glad that Emily isn't here right now to correct me. So activated charcoal is really sticky for free electrons. And so if you have smoke in the air, that smoke soaks up the electrons, the current disappears, and the alarm goes off, and you wake up, and you don't die in a fire. It's great. Another way of having a smoke detector, I'm getting sad now, not as many cheers. Another way of having a smoke detector is to have a light source, highly columnated. Think about a really narrow beam. And if there's a lot of smoke, think about the last couple mornings when the sun rises, and it's not really a sun, it's like a giant glowing dot. So the smoke spreads out the light. And spreading out the light means that if you have an off-axis photodetector, you can see that glowing orb. So that's called a photoelectric smoke detector. You probably have both of these in your house. How many of you ever, not ever. How many of you have thought about a smoke detector in the last week? Wow, that's a lot of people who just raised their hands. Oh, your battery. Okay, that's a good reason. You saw it on the wall. A smoke detector is not like a seatbelt. You don't have to turn it on every night before you go to bed. It's a passive safety measure. You don't have to think about it. In 1973, there was an oil embargo, and there was a gas crisis, and you couldn't buy vehicle fuel, and Jimmy Carter's political career crashed, but the speed limit was lowered to 55 miles an hour nationally. Before Carter lowered the speed limit was whatever the good old boys in your town felt like. And so, when the speed limit was lowered to 55 miles an hour, roughly 2,000 to 4,000 people per year didn't die compared to the previous year, which is a pretty big effect, right? 2,000 to 4,000 moms and dads and kids and grandmas and grandpas didn't die because everyone was driving slower. And I can tell you all kinds of physics about why that is. We don't have to talk about it now because Carl's about to say, Nathan, you're done. As soon as the speed limit was lifted, those 2,000 to 4,000 people a year died, right? So it was a real, did anyone think about the speed limit? Only to curse it because they didn't want to drive so slow. Okay, third example. All over Winona, you may have noticed, they're replacing sidewalks. And that's because the Americans with Disabilities Act says you can't have a bump in between adjacent pieces of sidewalk, between these two adjacent pieces of sidewalk, that's bigger than about a quarter inch. And so all over town, there have been concrete guys grinding away at the lips so that the transition between adjacent pieces of concrete is smooth. If you walk around and look at the ground, you will see this. It's all over the place. They've also been replacing chunks of concrete. I think this peaked about 2 years ago. Also, all of the bump outs have been redone with more gradual slopes, wider slopes. Now, if you're a lady, you menstruate, probably, and if you're a lady that's, maybe 55, 60 years old, you've menstruated for a long time, you're probably deficient, thank you, Carl, in calcium, and maybe other minerals too, but calcium particularly. Osteoporosis is a disease that you're susceptible to if you're old. And if you don't have a lot of calcium in your skeleton and you fall, which is a normal health risk of being old, you have, like a 5% chance of breaking your hip and ending up in a nursing home, which is not a healthy outcome. So to make everything more accessible, to make the sidewalks smoother, inadvertently, society has made the risk of going to nursing home because of a broken hip lower, which is sort of magical and wonderful. Because it's not like we have to have a campaign of signs saying, don't trip, watch out, osteoporosis is coming. Like, we don't have that. Instead, we just have this built-in passive safety measure that we don't have to think about. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about sexual assault. And so this is an honest trigger warning. On college campuses like Winona State and St. Mary's and the University of Minnesota, there are sexual assaults. The number is somewhere in between 10 and 15,000 per year in the United States. There are about 18 to 19 million college students in the United States. So if you want to be cold-hearted, you could say, well, what's a bigger problem, sexual assault or broken hips? If you want to be cold-hearted. If you believe these statistics, 15,000 out of 18 million is like 1 in 2,000 odds. So I guess broken hips are a bigger deal than sexual assault. What a horrible thing to say out loud. Especially if it happens to my daughter, or to me, or to you. The Department of Education statistics for this are police-reported sexual assaults. If you survey people, this is about 2 years old, roughly a quarter to a fifth of women in college have been sexually assaulted. Maybe a tenth of men. Maybe a quarter of people who are trans. Because if you're assaulted, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about it to a police officer? Do you want to admit it to your parents? What if you were drinking and he was drinking? There are a lot of reasons to not ever talk about it again. And that's why the Department of Ed statistics are so ridiculously low. Here's what I'm wondering about. Like, right now is the danger zone. Like, the next 2 months, this is the highest risk period, for college students, specifically freshmen and sophomores, in terms of sexual assault, because all of your family bonds are broken. You went off to college. You don't have any friends yet. Maybe you feel like risk-taking. Maybe there's a fraternity rush, right? There are all kinds of dangerous factors in play. I would love to know what the sidewalk bump outs, level sidewalk smoke detector approach is to sexual assault. Like, what is the thing that we could build into society that we never have to think about? And it works really well. If you know what that is, please tell Dan Wilson, because he's going to run for election again, and I sure hope he's elected. And maybe he could do it. I'm serious. Seatbelts are stupid because you have to buckle them. Airbags are way better because they're just on. Safety measures you don't have to think about don't depend on dumb humans like me. Here's a built-in safety measure. I don't know if it works. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Can my daughter go into the liquor store and buy beer? No, it's really obvious that she's underage. But of course, this guy, according to the math, is 65 years old. I think fake IDs are probably easy to get. So here's two pieces of poetry. So this is a piece from the book of Romans. Paul, one of Paul's disciples, wrote to the Romans. And there's this crazy verse where creation was subjected to futility, not because it wanted to be, but by God. Like God subjected creation to futility. I mean, it's kind of like recognizing that this is just the way it is. I don't know. And look, there's a Honda Accord. There's no such thing as one that doesn't rust. Maybe this is too far out. Here's another piece of poetry. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You just have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I love this poem. The end.
Oh, thank you, Nathan. Let's give Nathan a little more of a round of applause. All right, so what questions do we have for Nathan? I've got a mic here, and Carl's got a mic in the back. Put your hands up if you have a question for him.
I just want to say that you stopped exactly at 20 minutes.
That's a pro right there.
I tried.
Questions for Nathan?
Did you ever get your dishwasher fixed?
I did not fix the dishwasher. I took it to Redbox. They gave me $4 in scrap metal fees, and I bought a new one. Yeah, $4 in scrap steel.
We got a question back here.
Nathan, thank you so much for your talk and citing Mary Oliver. What are your thoughts on entropy, and is duct tape the solution for everything?
Well, so like that whole notion of entropy, if you think about coal and you think about carbon dioxide, they're the same thing, except coal is highly organized and has a lot of energy tied up. And so that bit in Romans that I referenced, the idea that, maybe someday in a better world, things won't corrupt or decay, doesn't really agree with physics, which makes me sad. Because I would love to live in that perfect world. But it doesn't seem like we can strive towards it. How about that? There, it's a Dodge.
I've got one question over here.
I'm just curious what brand of dishwasher you replaced it with.
So actually, all dishwashers are the same. Maytag, Whirlpool, KitchenAid. If you go to Menards and open them up, they all have the same tray. They all have the same sprayer arm. They all came from the same injection molding factory in China. So I don't know if it matters. It's not a Bosch. I did not buy a German dishwasher. I should have, I guess. I don't know. I think they're stupid. They're wonderful.
Sorry, can you say what the question was?
Why are people afraid of electric or battery-powered lawnmowers? I think they're just wonderful. I've spent so much time around small engines that I've lost a lot of hearing. It's hard for me to hear your questions. So,
when you say afraid, is that people just are concerned about how long they last on a battery charge? Is that what the issue is? Or are they actually afraid of it? It's going to do something.
I've done no interviews about, so I don't have any real data. I'm unencumbered by knowledge. I don't know. I don't know why people, would be afraid, but the warranty that Menards offers makes me think that they're trying to cover up for something. All right.
So your discussion of smoke alarms, and then you just mentioned, like German dishwasher, made me think about not a question, but the dreaded comment from the audience. Did you know that in Germany, smoke alarms were not required until starting in some German states in 2014?
I'm going to guess that that's because Germany is not a pro-life society like the United States is a pro-life society. Obviously, we care a lot about people's lives. Yeah, I've heard that's because Germany is built out of stone and there's no wood in the whole country. Like every house is made out of stone and it won't burn, even if you try.
So after my shameless comment, we do have a question back here.
All right.
I'm kind of curious. Why was the radioactive material in older fire alarms?
So the americium-241 that they use in old firearms, smoke alarms, is a really long-lived alpha emitter, and it doesn't really have many other uses that I'm familiar with. So you can use just a little bit of it. It's not really dangerous to humans as long as you don't eat it. And yeah. There was one person that made really bad choices, and he got 10,000 ionization detectors, and he made a backyard nuclear reactor. Don't do it.
On that, let's give Nathan another round of applause. All right, grab another drink, get cozy. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with our second talk with Dan.
A huge thanks goes out to the No Name Bar and the Nerd Bosses for making this whole event possible. Tune in next week for a part 2 continuation of this nerd-tastic event. To check out Nerd Nite Winona and even sign up as a speaker yourself, visit their Facebook page at Nerd Nite Winona or find a Nerd Nite near you at nerdnite.com. I'm Dylan Alzate, and for more nerd-tastic or local Winona events, tune in to Culture Clique every Thursday at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. You can also listen to past episodes of Culture Clique on your favorite streaming service. Find links at kqal.org.
Creating cultural awareness and understanding. You've been listening to Culture Clique. Support for Culture Clique is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Culture Clique is produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. For more information, look us up on the web at kqal.org. And thanks for listening to Culture Clique.